Thank you, Kerry, for that kind introduction, and can I also acknowledge Stephen and your leadership of CEDA, and Lee as well. Obviously, congratulations for the work you are doing, and thank you also for your welcome to country. Many distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, great to be here, and it does seem as if I have been talking to CEDA for a long time. I do remember speaking in opposition. I think about 10 people turned up. But there were those 10 people. You could still be here today, so thank you. You are special to me. But when I go back, as I run through a few thoughts today, I wanted to start 8 years ago. And if you reflect back 8 years ago, what happened, what are the key events, and I quickly thought, well, 8 years ago, no one had heard of Justin Bieber or One Direction, so that was a much better world. No one, in my household, I didn't have teenage daughters, and that was a beautiful world. But I also reflected that I was thinking of going into politics. And the question became, well, why would you want to do that? And I don't know whether people in this room have actually sat there and thought about it. Why on earth would you want to go into politics? And it came down to a pretty simple basis. As I looked at my community, I'd become very tired of projects that had been promised and never delivered. The way services were being delivered were chaotic and ad hoc. And then I looked at a state level and I thought, well, why on earth do they undertake infrastructure in this way? You know, why do they actually announce things without funding alongside it? Why are they doing projects that seem to me to make no sense when there are other priorities? And that package, I thought, well, if ever I wanted to make a contribution to my community and state, I thought, well, I think I can potentially do that in state politics. So in that sense, it's time to put my finance career down, and there's a few that I work with here in the finance career, and said, I'm going to give this a go. And to this day, I haven't regretted it for a second. But it didn't come without its challenges, and I'll reflect on a couple of those. I then go back to 4 years ago, and I want you to think again with me what New South Wales was like 4 years ago. And when you go back, it was a place that I think is very different today, and I'll articulate that in a little while. But remember where we were economically, fundamentally. We had, for some reason, got to a position that New South Wales was 8th in the country, so behind all states and territories, on a range of economic measures. Jobs growth, slowest in the country. Economic growth, slowest in the country. And in some cases, for 10 years across those indicators. Housing starts were at 50-year lows. Business confidence was low. Retail sales, slowest in the country. And we had got into a rut where we just accepted it. You know, there was this broad sense that New South Wales, well, we were great once and now we're not. And we don't know how that happened, but that's just the way life is. And I think as I came in to actually have a look of the challenges before us, it was, well, by the way, you know, congratulations on coming to government, but you know, you are facing a $30 billion infrastructure deficit. You have got expenses rising out of control. Your AAA rating will be gone within 12 months without any action. And all of that presented a challenge. But I think that we have made significant progress. And I would say we are significantly better than we were 4 years ago. And I want to run through some highlights for you. In fact, we've done up the top 100 reasons, or the top 100 things that we think why New South Wales is better. So I'm going to run through every single one of them right now. You think I'm kidding? No, but it is. And it's not often that you can sit back and reflect on achievements. But as I sit and look at my team, and there are many in my team who I just have gone along this entire journey with, all of whom I'm very proud of. But when you reflect on some of the achievements, I think we have a lot to be proud of. And as we head towards an election, and I will mention a little bit given the timing, I think there is a clear and present danger that the momentum that we've started to see is stalled. And indeed, we start to head back to what we saw previously. But let me run through very clearly what I think are the top 10. Now, they're in no particular order because there'll be debate about this, but there are certainly 10 things I'd like to just highlight. And the first comes back to the economy. And the economy, when you reflect on it, is really the key. If you can get the economy moving, then the state gets moving, jobs come, investments come, that leads to additional revenue, additional spending, and the upward power of that obviously helps government as well in terms of the provision of revenue into services and infrastructure. So that was a key focus. It is $40 billion larger than it was 4 years ago. We're close to cracking through that $500 billion level. And importantly, while we've done that, overall debt in the state sector has actually fallen. So the forecast debt at this point is supposed to be $20 billion, and we've reduced that to over half below that. So we've also seen, as I've run through, across all those indicators, we now have the strongest jobs growth in the nation. So there's over 125,000 new jobs have come in. At the same time, the strongest economic growth. Our retail sales are the strongest. Housing starts are now at 20-year highs in terms of the last quarter. So we are moving along on all those indicators, and confidence is surging. So across all of them, we are moving in a positive direction, and the momentum is back here in New South Wales. I think if I asked you, that you would sense it. You know, you would sense across various sectors there is much more momentum than we've had for a long time, and that's something we're proud of. More to do, but proud. As we've got the budget under control, which is really the second thing, because we had a challenge. You've got to get the economy going, but for the long-term good of the state, you also needed to control the budget. And we have done that methodically, and it hasn't been easy along that journey, but we're now in a position, over close to $10 billion in savings have been achieved, and if we hadn't have taken action, there'd be close to a $4 billion deficit this year. But we've actually in surplus. So we've restored the budget into a surplus position. We've reduced net debt, and we importantly have also across a range of programs improved funding and focused funding both into frontline services as well as the vulnerable, and I will touch on that as we go. Thirdly, in terms of the transport space and infrastructure more broadly, you know, what do you do? And Maurice Yemmer spoke about this yesterday. You know, how can you actually build the infrastructure you desperately need? And he said on the basis of two choices, you either put up taxes or you look at the balance sheet. And our borrowing, remember our borrowing was right up against our AAA credit rating. So borrowing, yes, sensible borrowing to a level you can do. But if you reached your limits or close to your limits, then you have to start looking at your balance sheet, which is what we've done. And in essence, we've taken an old asset and turned it into a new asset. You know, you lease an asset and you turn it into a long-term asset for the future of the state. And I think that is something that is making a huge difference, not only in the infrastructure, but it's also starting to drive the economy. And as you look at the economic growth stats, the public spending is starting to come in quite a significant way, and that will continue to rise over the next few years as well. But we've also, what have we done with that? Well, we've actually started significant projects. In opposition, we said that we would start one of the major motorways in Sydney, which was the M5, the duplication, the M4, and the what was it, F3? It was F3 then, it's now the M1. The M1 to the M2, so the North Connects project. And the good news is that they're actually all underway, every single one of them. And that is something that needed to be done in this city, and they're funded. Through the transactions we've undertaken, we've got the funding there, the projects are underway. Significant. The West Connects project, which is the 5 and 4 put together, is the largest road project undertaken in the history of the country. It's a very significant metropolitan road project that will make a big difference in the daily life of people across Western Sydney in particular. The rail link, don't think you can get a better example. I don't know, I won't show of hands for who's from the northwest. But the North West Rail Link was almost what defined politics for a long time in this state. Because remember, there was 1 year it was on, the next year it was off. And it was on, off, on, off, on, off. Right back in the beginning, 1998 that was promised. And that was the position we were in. We're in a big infrastructure project where, and think about it, okay, so the government says they're going to build that infrastructure, which means that housing starts, people buy housing on the anticipation of it, businesses move into business parks on the anticipation of the transport coming. But then it stops. You know, so how can you have any confidence if that's the sort of approach your government takes? So the commitment to build that, long overdue, there was almost a moral obligation to get it done because it's promises for so long. But, you know, having stood there with the Transport Minister, who's done an outstanding job on this, we saw the tunnel boring machine pump through for the first time. It is not only underway, it is well underway. It is on track, it is on schedule, and at this stage it is under budget, which is a good thing, which also lines up with the South West Rail Link, a similar project that was promised and not delivered a long time, stopped on, off, and it has been delivered in our time in government. There wasn't a centimetre of track. It's been funded, delivered. It is over 12 months ahead of schedule and $300 million under budget. So the infrastructure is starting to work, and we're very proud of that. I will conclude on where I think we can go beyond that. In hospitals, I am very proud of what we've done. And again, good examples. If you go to Dubbo and Wagga, or places like the Northern Beaches, for many years, in some cases decades, there was promises of upgraded hospitals and new hospitals. In Dubbo and Wagga, they are almost done. And the significant projects that were promised, never delivered, are underway. Indeed, we've done over $5 billion in investment in hospital infrastructure across the state. And when we came in, one of the pages, which I did ask in my Treasurer's brief, I said, is this true? But in terms of our health facilities, over 50% were more than 50 years old. You know, that's what the sort of backlog that we had come into. So we had to get on with it. We have, and I think the health infrastructure, you're starting to see it emerge in many places, and certainly it will make a difference in the delivery of the world-class health facilities we have. I think government has got to a position, which is my fifth point, where customer service has started to take over. And you know, I don't think, this is not easy. I mean, many companies spend a lot of money and a lot of time trying to work out how you can deliver the best possible customer service, and they're experts at it. Government is not an expert at customer service. I don't think I need to sort of surprise you with that one. And indeed, you know, I do put this example down. Remember, and it was 8 years ago, 9 years ago, when you got your licence renewal, and you knew that you were going down for a battle with the RTA. Remember that? Your heart sunk. You thought, oh, I cannot believe it. It can't be there now. I just did it. I mean, you know, thank you to the former RTA staff, but just saying. But I don't know whether anyone has gone into Service New South Wales, but it is a different world. And we brought in someone in terms of Mike Pratt that understands customer service, comes from a retail background, appropriate channels, what it means for our staff to be engaged, and them eagerly anticipating what the staff the customer appreciation scores are, and the customer satisfaction in those Service New South Wales places is actually 98%. I mean, it's more popular than chocolate. And who would have thought that a government could actually deliver that? And it's something we're very proud of. And it's similarly with the Opal card. Again, the Opal card, I mean, that's really all about customer convenience and using public transport, trying to make it easier. If you make it easy, well, people use public transport. And the Opal card has done that. It's been rolled out. Again, a project that was promised, and lots of false starts, but it is now being delivered. Over 2 million people have got an Opal card out there, and that's making a difference that certainly, again, Gladys Berejiklian has overseen, but make a difference to people's daily lives. You know, those queues, your wallets, all of that thing has been changed. So I think in terms of customer service, we've started to see a focus from government, understanding, listen, our job here is to try and make people's lives easier, and the services we're providing, let's focus on the customers, and I think we've done that. The sixth point I've got is the actual metrics, and this is for the sort of bankers in the room, and it's something that I love because it's not something that governments have done well. In a management context, you know, what gets measured gets done. You know, if your boss comes to you and says, I'm going to measure you on these 4 things, well, over the 12-month period, you're very focused on what they are. So in a context, very big organisations and very complex, but you know, in health and education, and crime, you know, what are the things that we're focusing on and how are we responding? And when you go through the metrics, they're actually quite impressive. In a crime context, we are, for the first time, since Boscar recording was taken 25 years ago, we have 10 of the 17 major offence categories actually falling, and the rest are stable. Now, it's the first time it's happening, so they're either stable or falling, and they've done that the last 2 reporting periods. In health, in terms of elective surgery patients, 92% were seen on time before we came in. It's now 100%. Non-urgent emergency department patients seen within 29 minutes. That's now down to 24 minutes. Previously, 58% of people left the emergency department within 4 hours. Now it's 69%. So there is a movement upwards in some of the key metrics. Literacy and numeracy, and we put significant amount of resources into literacy and numeracy teachers and support. And what we saw in 2014, that 20% more students reached the expected reaching standard by the end of their kindergarten compared to previous years. And Ken Boston, who many people would know, who's an expert in this field, says he hasn't seen results like that previously. So there are some positive, quantitative movements across key metrics, obviously key metrics across the delivery of customer service and the services of government. I am actually in the midst of creating a New South Wales government dashboard. And in that, I want to know on a daily basis, monthly basis, yearly basis, how the performance and operation of government is going. Now, I know that's going to drive some ministers crazy, but I'm going to have them do exactly the same thing. So we know in terms of what is the reliability, how late are our trains today, are they on time or not, where are the problems, some of these health metrics, what are we seeing in our emergency departments at the moment. And I think that as ministers and the government state that starts to look at that and take ownership of that, well then the whole public service moves as a team. We're focused on these metrics, this delivery of service, and I think that's something that we will be moving ahead next term if given the opportunity. The seventh is school funding and education. I think we've got a proud record there. We've certainly focused very strongly in the need to deliver additional funding to education, and despite some of the myths you might hear from others about this, i.e. the opposition, we actually put 16% more to education funding than when we've come in. We're the first to sign up to the Gonski reforms, or the National Education Agreement reforms. Now, that is significant because for the first time, what this was trying to do was say, okay, every child, regardless of background or postcode or school, deserves the same level of funding. And that shifts funding towards some of our most disadvantaged students. And that is something that we're very proud of. Now, what's going to be important is the metrics, making sure that that money is being spent in a way and is making a difference on a daily basis in terms of the outcomes that we're seeing. But we have done that, and I think we've certainly done it in a way that is consistent with the overall reforms. And our overall reforms are giving power back to our principals, back to our school communities. I mean, did you know that 4 years ago our schools were only responsible for 10% of their budgets? Now, no one is going to pay attention to their budget if you're not responsible for it. Whereas if you're responsible for it and you find savings, you can save in one part, you can spend in another part. You give some power and autonomy back to your principals to actually do that. And what we saw with the Gonski reforms, they have the power and the autonomy to spend this money on the resources they need to drive the metrics. How do you improve the educational outcomes of where you are? And there's many stories of teachers coming together, suggesting ways, and schools enacting it where previously they wouldn't. And I think that's a huge step forward. The eighth, which of those accounting is the third last, is the social benefit bonds. And I'm not sure whether people have seen this or heard about it, but I think this is something that New South Wales will be very proud of. I have been accused of being interested in the numbers. That's not the political numbers, that's the financial numbers. Being a former finance worker and obviously a former treasurer, the numbers are something that are of interest to me, but I generally believe that numbers on a page are not the real bottom line. And when I've spoken about the economy moving, that's fantastic. But if the economy moves, I believe there is an obligation on us to take the most vulnerable with us. It also is very connect. If you want the capacity in the long term as a society to look after the vulnerable and to give the disadvantaged every chance, then you have to be fiscally responsible because that's the only way. They actually go together and it's not argued enough. At the same time, you need to be innovative. And I think that what the social benefit bonds is exactly that. And we have gone to the market and said, okay, are there private sector investors that are looking for a social outcome? Can we give them, if we achieve that social outcome, are there savings to come to government? And if they are, then those savings can be distributed back to the investors and at the same time into approved services. And that's what it's done. So one example we've done, which is the new PIN bond, and that was the first done in this country. It is leading the world in terms of the research. We are absolutely the cutting edge of the world in relation to these. families where a child is removed or just about to be removed. And think of the sort of circumstances that family is in. If the program doesn't come in, on average, it's about only 25% ever come back to their family. So they've basically put out to care and foster care. What this program said is we think that through Uniting Care, they think that they can get 60% returned through intensive programs right at that critical point, counselling into the family, support into the family. Now, in the first year, they have achieved that number. So there's close to 30 kids that otherwise in the system would have been left away from their families, returned to their families. And think about the knock-on impacts. You know, those kids that then go on, and there's justice, a cost to the justice system. There's obviously impacts in terms of education. There's long-term impacts in health. They're wound back, and you've got right at the beginning, but most importantly, you've got made a difference to a young kid's life and given much greater opportunity to succeed. So that's something that we're very proud, and we are certainly doing much more on that. We've announced that over the next 4 years, what we want to do is 2 a year. And it brings in, there's a whole range of social capital that comes, but it's all about the outcomes. The whole sector is now, well, actually this program, what are the outcomes we're trying to achieve? And I think that that has been a very positive step. Second, lastly, number 9, we've actually signed up to the NDIS. And again, I said that, you know, the only way to protect the vulnerable is by protecting the budget. And you know, this was always such an ambitious project, but one that had to be done. And anyone who's been involved in the disability sector or is with a family or friends, and you know how tough it is. And this is life-changing for them. So we were determined to do it. But it means it also has to be funded. So we needed a long-term funding profile that could be afforded. And as we went about our budget repair job, we did it on the context of knowing that we were committing to the NDIS. And I have to say that there's a lot in government that worked on this, and it's one of the initiatives I'm very proud. And the difference it's going to make, you can't put numbers on, but it'll be a huge difference and impact to thousands and thousands of people and families across the estate for generations to come. We need to get it right, but we were the first to sign up. The last point I'll put is that we've also done a significant amount in the electricity sector. So when we came in, it was clear that prices were surging out of control, and they had been. So for 5 years, back at the regulatory reset 2009, it was 60% was what we effectively inherited. Now, as we looked at the businesses, there were significant inefficiencies. There were significant costs incurred that weren't required. There was absolutely an overspend in relation to the capital. So we methodically have gone about the process of removing those costs, which starts to put downward pressure on consumer bills and business bills. And, you know, for some reason in this state, we let it get away with us. Former governments let those inefficiencies stay, and that means that our overall economy wasn't as efficient as it should be, because businesses are paying more for electricity costs than they should. The impact on households, less discretionary income because they're putting more into electricity bills. But we have taken the action necessary to start to put downward pressure on prices. And it didn't take long before we got to billions of dollars in savings that were required that have started that downward trend. And as you can see, the forecast of electricity prices, predominantly, which is the network costs, I mean, it's close to 60% of the overall cost here in this state, is network costs, and that is on a downward trajectory. So I guess the conclusion is that as I look back at those achievements, I do see some tangible progress on where we are, but also where we need to go. And I'm proud of what has been achieved, but you know, friends, I want to do much more. And I think that New South Wales deserves the opportunity to continue the momentum we've seen, but also to be bolder. You know, for some reason, I think all of us in this city and state got to a position that our boldness or our desire for greatness was dulled. We almost thought it was impossible. You know, how can, look, it's all too hard. We're not going to get there. I know we need this piece of infrastructure. I know Sydney needs to attract more events and more people, but look, it's all just too hard. And I think that those days are over. I generally do. And I put forward to you that our Rebuild New South Wales program is a significant step in that. because it says to the people of this city and state, we are tired of waiting to catch up on our infrastructure spend. I mean, why should we just be fixing up the problems? Why don't we get ahead and actually future-proof this city and state? Why don't we? You know, why do we have to look at our sports facilities and cultural facilities and say, wouldn't it be great if they were upgraded? I've been to these other global cities and I look at their art galleries and I look at their sports facilities and they're not here, but why are they not? And why can't we? When we look at congestion in this city, and I don't have to tell you from one end of the city to the other, congestion is a problem. Economically, it costs $5 billion a year. If we do nothing, the forecast says it's going to cost $8 billion a year. We have to do something. And what rebuilding does in terms of enhancing our motorway network, which is significant, an additional road crossing across the harbour which takes pressure off the bridge and the eastern distributor, pressure off both ends of the city. The WestConnex project, as is extended and goes alongside what we are doing with the second harbour rail crossing. And this is the important point, because it's not just the motorways, we have to deal with the public transport. And that second harbour crossing, which is the first, or it's the extension of the North-West rail link, which goes all the way through the city and up to Bankstown, provides 60% more capacity across our rail network. So suddenly you've got the capacity, 100,000 commuters extra an hour that can be used and absorbed on the rail network. So as the population comes in, we actually have capacity on our rail, and we've got capacity on our roads. Where the growth areas are, we start to build the schools and the hospitals in anticipation of that growth, rather than retrofitting and catching up. In regional New South Wales, the spine of the state, the new highway and other highways, where productivity improvements, safety improvements, water, you know, how do we get water to some of our drought-affected areas? All of those we can do. And that is what our plan is about. Now, both sides of politics have looked at this proposal, and both sides of politics know it is the right thing to do. And if you go into Macquarie Street, and you have over the last 20 years, in the corridors, everyone's saying this is exactly what should be done. But everyone knows that it's very easy to run a scare campaign against. And I'm saying to everyone in Sydney and New South Wales, enough's enough. Enough is enough. It is about time that we did what was right. And yes, the scare campaign will come, but I don't care. Because I know myself, together with my team, we are doing the right thing for this state. We actually have the capacity to move forward in a way that we can all be proud. And I think that's worth fighting for. And when the scare campaign comes about electricity prices, well, we know it's not true. Look at the experience in Victoria and South Australia. The network cost in real terms since the private sector came in has gone down in Victoria 18%, 17% South Australia, and over the same period here is up 122%. So you have the capacity where the truth, and ACCC, Productivity Commission, use the independent reports, don't rely on me, they confirm that is the case. So if that is the case, that there is downward pressure on prices, we've got the capacity to lease the assets, and we can build the infrastructure this state desperately needs, well, that is worth fighting for. And I don't care what comes in terms of the scare campaign, nor does my team. But I think everyone in this state is actually up for an honest discussion, a group of people or a team that says, we want to do what's right. And if you look at the economic benefits, let alone the day-to-day benefits of the health services, the schools, the transport, the roads, I mean, the impact on the day-to-day life is huge, but economically it's even bigger. The modelling suggests it's going to grow the New South Wales economy by $300 billion over the next 20 years. So that's an ambitious plan, and I've heard people say, well, that is ambitious, you know, that's going to be hard to achieve. Yes, it is ambitious, but it will be achieved. And I'm determined to deliver it. So I do look forward to the next few weeks. It will be a tough campaign. It will be a close election. But I have this strong sense, if we are given the opportunity and the honour that it is to win the election and to govern again for another 4 years, the next 4 years are going to be some of the most exciting that this state has seen, and it is long overdue. Thanks very much.